welcome to the book club for Secure Love, my book. I'm so super excited to be here doing this. It's something I've really wanted to do for a long time. And so we're finally here, able to put it together. So what we're going to do is, this is the first time I've done this, so we're all going to be kind of learning as we go. So what I'm going to do is do, probably one chapter or less per week. Some chapters are longer than others and more content dense than others. And so we'll just, work on it, go through it take as long as we need to get the information put out there very thoroughly and answer, as many questions as I possibly can. I'm sure a lot of you are going to have the same questions. Sometimes, I rethink things, as an author, we're always kind of, learning new things and integrating it into what we already knew, and sometimes even changing our position on things. So I'm going to keep you up to speed as far as any of that's happened for me with the book. And, I'm always working with clients. That's my number one biggest passion, is working with real couples. So I'm just constantly, every session I learn something new about couples work. And so I want to integrate that into this club. And then obviously, you can't put everything in a book. So this is a great way for me to expand upon what I know. All right. Well, so what we'll do is I will kind of go over, the basics of each chapter, starting with chapter 1, and then, give you guys an opportunity to give feedback or ask questions. And, I do take personal questions, absolutely, because that a lot of times puts everything into context. And sometimes it's easier for me to answer personal questions because I get, again, more context with what's actually happening. So I do like having, the opportunity to answer kind of specifically, because usually every couple's dealing with the same kind of themes or patterns. So it's really helpful for everyone. Sometimes there's questions I just can't answer. They're too specific, and I would need to really know a lot more information about that couple to really be able to give a solid answer. And so if that happens, I'm just going to say, hey, listen, this is not, a question I can really comfortably answer, because I just don't have enough information in this environment. It's not really possible for me to get that information. So anyway, that's what we'll do. And I'm just going to take a moment to ask you guys, do you have maybe any questions or anything specifically that you'd like to get out of this process? And I'll just take, a couple minutes here. So, Katrina, how are we going to do questions and comments, since we do have a pretty big group?
Everyone can use the chat to type in their questions.
Okay. All right. And then I also would like, to have, give you guys the opportunity to ask me questions on camera too. I think I personally feel more engaged with the group when that happens. And, so obviously we're time limited, but that is something that I want to make sure that we do too. All right. So we have a good question. Okay, so this is a place where I'm going to have to kind of figure out how I manage the room and manage the content, because I'm going to we're here to go through the book chapter by chapter, but I'm also going to get questions that aren't about the chapter, that are more related specifically to your situations. And I don't want to ignore that, because it's important. So I'll probably maybe just spend the bulk of my time on the chapter, and then a few questions that are kind of outside that content. So since I'm just going in order here, someone asks, is there a connection between anxious styles and a lack of empathy? Yes, because anxiety blocks empathy in a given moment. So usually those with anxious attachment, generally speaking, are more in tune with other people's emotions, because they're usually heavily in tune with their own, even if they don't necessarily have words for it. They recognize their own pain, and when we recognize our own pain, it's fairly easy to recognize the pain in others. However, in moments when they get triggered and that anxiety really starts to take over, and they go into, find safety mode, protect mode, take action to find safety mode, it does make it much more difficult to, in the moment, in the present moment, stay connected and stay empathic to a partner. And that's part of the work that I do, is help people, get out of these negative cycles that are kind of defined by a lack of empathy. And, be able to access, empathy, not just for each other, but compassion for self, or empathy for parts of self. It's, I recognize that empathy is usually a relational term, meaning it's about someone else, but we also have parts of ourself that need empathy from us too. So yes, the answer is yes. Anyone with an insecure attachment, anyone in any interaction, even if you generally have a secure attachment that is really triggered and not managing that trigger in a healthy way, is going to lose empathy, because the focus goes into getting my own pain relieved and getting my own need met. Okay, so a lot of you are saying thank you, and you're happy to be here, and appreciate those comments. It energizes me. And yes, the sessions will be recorded, so you can go back, you can watch them, you can not come and watch them later. There will be times when I can't come to our weekly meeting because I'll be, vacation or traveling or whatever. And in which case we'll just pick back up on the next chapter when I get back. And again, if you need to miss, then you have that recording. All right. So let's dive into chapter 1. Before though, I do want to just look through the comments and see if there is anything that is related to the structure of the program, to just clarify. So someone says, I'm partially through the book, and they want to know if I discuss what happens when one partner is moving toward secure self-healing, showing up in newer ways, but the other partner doesn't want to work on themselves. I do address that in the book at the end. And yes, that absolutely does happen. There's no way you can make your partner change and want to grow. You can do things on your own to exponentially increase the odds that you can make a safer relationship just by doing your own work. And that safer environment and relationship can certainly inspire your partner's nervous system to settle, which helps us be more open to growth. So yes, there are plenty of things that you can do on your end. It's not always a quick fix. Sometimes it's just about giving it space and time and planting seeds. And then there are, of course, situations where one partner is just simply not in a place or ready to grow. And I do talk about kind of what the steps would be at that point. Okay, so Sarah says, how long have you been working with couples using EFT? Definitely over 10 years, maybe 12 years, 2000, maybe 13 years. Yeah. Okay, so let's go into chapter 1, and I'm just going to go through the sections and, the kind of idea of the work that I do, which is EFT. Someone just asked, that means emotionally focused therapy for couples. It's working with the underlying unmet attachment needs and unresolved, painful feelings that each partner has brought to the relationship, and that each partner has created in the relationship, or the relationship issues have created pain, and we're not dealing with that pain in a healthy way. And if we're not dealing with that pain in a healthy way, then we are going into these negative communication cycles that then further erode attachment safety and further erode feelings of connection and create more disconnection and more anger and more of the bad feelings. And then it just kind of starts to feed upon itself. So in EFT, we're going underneath whatever we see on the surface. You know, the title of chapter 1 is the problem beneath the problem. So, you know, yes, we're talking about finances. Yes, there is a lot on the line when it comes to finances. We all need to feel secure financially. And if we're not feeling secure financially, then we are going to feel angst about that. But it's not a relationship problem yet until the couple is trying to resolve their differences and work together on finances and they go in a negative cycle. So if you're going into a negative cycle when you try to talk about the financial stress, your two things are going to happen. One is you're going to not really get to a solution about finances, most likely, and that topic is just going to keep popping up over and over again until it gets some resolution. And two, you're going to harm your emotional bond with each other, and you're going to harm your safety in the relationship. And you might even harm each other's and your own views of self and create more shame. And so in EFT, we're going in and we're dealing with that stuff underneath the surface, and we're trying to get secure attachment on board, get safety on board, get closeness on board. And we can assume from there that the symptoms of the root problem, which is the fights over money, et cetera, will start to resolve themselves. And yes, sometimes, you know, once we get that closeness back on board, we do need in the therapy to work on, hey, let's talk about money right now, and let me just kind of sit here and help you through that. But usually I don't need to do that. Usually once I'm finished with the couple, they're already doing that on their own. And, you know, that's not to say that that always happens. Sometimes couples do need more practice with these harder topics. And so, you know, I talk about this couple, Andrew and Jen, where, you know, they appear to be fighting over keys, where one partner is putting the keys. And, you know, Jen likes to keep an orderly home. That's how she kind of does her self-care. And she's asked, you know, Andrew over and over to put the keys away. And he comes in and throws the keys on the counter. And you know, if it's just about the keys, then Jen would just pick the keys up and put them away herself. But it's not about the keys. It's about the fact that she's asked him over and over and over to put the keys away. And so now she's feeling unheard, unseen, unresponded to, unimportant, because the keys for her represent emotional safety around her need for order, right? And so he's not, in her mind, he's not really caring about her need and her emotion and her needs to feel responded to in the relationship. And so that's really what the trigger is about. And so then he goes into, you know, he's got a good reason to be triggered also. And his reason is he's over here scrambling around trying to help her get her needs met. But then bam, you know, he gets defined by this moment where it's not being met and where he's not being seen. And so then he goes into his move in the negative cycle, which is to defend himself. And so what happens is they're both arguing about attachment needs. It looks like they're arguing about the keys. Really, they're arguing about attachment needs, some of which are fueled by the stuff between them and some of which are fueled by stuff they brought to the relationship on their own. And so, you know, we got to get them communicating outside of these negative cycles because the negative cycles just don't get them anywhere. And they just don't know how to talk about this deeper stuff because nobody ever taught them. No, growing up, neither of them grew up in an environment where they really had the opportunity to learn more about what their real feelings are and to communicate those feelings in a healthy way and to manage their own triggers in a healthy way and to reach for each other for help in a healthy way. And so what that means is that each of them self-abandon their own emotions and by going into these negative cycles, and each of them are abandoning each other's emotions. So,
excuse me.
yes.
When you say abandoning, do you mean
Yeah.
like not recognizing?
I mean, yes, not recognizing is one way to abandon, right? And none of abandonment isn't deliberate, right? It happens very subconsciously. One is not recognizing, two is not responding to and helping. Instead, it's going into protecting from having to go there, as opposed to diving in, recognizing, oh, this is one of those moments where I'm starting to feel kind of alone. And, that's a bad place for me. And then communicating about that instead of just staying up in the anger and the protest or the frustration and shutdown.
Okay. So it's more I guess I'm wondering, like the whole concept of self-abandonment
Mhm.
is foreign to me.
Okay.
So
Oh,
that's
I'm
why.
glad that you're saying that because that is, a lot of people have that experience. If you grew up in a home where, and some people pick this up later in life, but most people with an insecure attachment, they grow up in homes where their emotions are not tended to. So their emotions are abandoned, right? They're either ignored, they're invalidated, they're not talked about, they're shamed, they're punished. And let me just put this out there. Good parents overall can do this unintentionally if they don't have awareness of their own emotions, right? And so, to varying degrees, the child, let's say you, your emotions were abandoned. That part of you wasn't tended to. It would be like your parents not giving you food or something, right? You're going to have a consequence. There's going to be an impact of that. And so because you never learned to show up for your emotions from another person who was responsible for helping you do that, you have to learn to abandon your own emotions, not show up for them, and then do all of these things in life to protect yourself from going there, as opposed to going there and being with it. So think of it like this. We all need to eat to survive, right? That doesn't mean we're eating all day long. It means that when we get hungry, we know how to say, oh, this is my hunger. Doesn't have to be obviously like a conscious conversation, but we recognize the signals. Okay, we're hungry. It's time to go get some food to relieve this hunger. We just don't know how to do that with emotional pain. We don't really sometimes have words for it being there. It's not organized. And then what we do is we do all these things to try to relieve it that don't work, ultimately don't work.
Yeah. I just the word emotions didn't even come up in my family
Mhm.
growing up. Like it was always
Yeah,
instead of like what are you feeling or why are you feeling it? It's like why are you doing that? It was always about the behavior. Why are you
yeah,
doing that? Why are you saying that? Why are you
right,
thinking that? Never about what you're actually feeling. So we never
right.
even discussed the word emotions or feelings.
So that's the abandonment.
Okay.
Right. And so, how could you possibly know how to go, right now I'm feeling angry and like something isn't working for me. And, what's going on under that anger? What kind of fears are there? What is my anger trying to protect? The anger is very valid. The anger has wisdom in it. It's trying to create some sort of healthy change, right? And to recognize and really know what that healthy change is, what you're needing, you have to be able to dive into the pain and listen to it.
Yeah.
I don't have it out yet, but I'm doing a whole anxious attachment self work course that's going to be like several hours long. And it is walking people through the whole process of not self abandoning. First, we do exercises to just get awareness of the emotion where it sits in your body, naming it. Then we move into validating it. Then we move into listening to it. Then we move into communicating it or helping it and slash helping it. So anyway, how could you possibly know how to do that if nobody ever sat with you and said, hey, clearly, before you threw the toy, something happened in your body, something came up. Like, let's talk about that. Nobody throws a toy randomly. You had some feeling, and we got to help you out here because one, that feeling needs help. And two, that feeling needs a better way to be acted out than throwing things. Okay.
Yeah.
Help? Does that help?
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm going to show you guys a little video real fast. There is a Netflix show called Cassandra, which, spoiler alert, don't watch this if you want to watch Cassandra and you don't want to know what happens at the end. But It's absolutely brilliantly done. It's like a journey through attachment theory in the context of this like totally creepy psychological thriller. And the ending is just so powerful because the ending is exactly what I'm doing with every single with every single individual I work with. And I always work with couples, but I'm doing individual work alongside the couples work. It all goes hand in hand. And at the end of the therapy, and you can actually listen to the podcast I did with Melissa and Drew, and you can see how this is where it all goes. And it's basically learning to not self abandon. And when you learn to not self abandon, you're much better able to not abandon each other. So you stop self abandoning and you stop abandoning each other. And so I just want to show you this little clip that I literally recorded from my phone on my computer. So it's like a terrible recording. But and it's also in German. So this is layers of complications with this video. But if you watch it, you'll see and you read the lyrics to the song that's playing. And maybe if nothing else, that can help you kind of visualize self-abandonment and not self-abandoning anymore, and kind of give you a felt sense of this work. And when you see her talking to this little girl, the metaphor is the little girl is her. She's talking to her own little girl. Um, okay, so let's see if I can pull this up relatively quickly. Okay, so I watched that about 1,000 times and just cried and cried. So I hope that hits some of you in your heart, and you can see where this can go. This is very, very possible to stop self-abandoning. And as soon as someone teaches you how, and again, when both partners stop this self-abandoning, they stop showing up in negative cycles. They stop staying in these protective places, and they stop abandoning each other emotionally, which is what negative cycles do. They abandon each other emotionally. So with that, I'll go ahead and answer another question, and then I'll go on to a little presentation I have on a slideshow, or a little slide, I guess I would say. Okay, so Taral has a question. So go ahead, Taral. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Yes. Hi. Thank you so much. Your podcast and books have been incredible.
Oh, I'm so happy.
Very helpful.
Okay, great.
Um,
I'm really happy to. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And keep going.
So one of the questions I had was in terms of this abandonment of your inner child, as I've noticed, like as I've started doing the work, like I'm able to kind of connect with the child and like the deeper feelings. And background, I'm a disorganized attachment type. And so like I feel like I take 2 steps forward and I'll connect, and then literally like the next day or a couple days later I won't be able to connect or find her even. And then like 3 days later, like I find her again. And it's kind of been a journey in terms of like that struggle of trying to stay connected to the inner child.
Sure.
Is that normal, or what is the process like?
Think about raising a child, right? Think about like, they're a baby and then all of a sudden they hit the age of toddlerhood where their emotions are just super big and chaotic. And how long does it take to teach a child starting at age 2 to really get healthy with their emotions and regulate and learn to express themselves in a healthier way? I mean, it takes a while. It takes a lot of repeated interactions. And so on one hand, you kind of have to accept yourself and love yourself where you are and say, look, I'm learning this stuff. It's all new. Not only did I not get it taught to me growing up, but I also got all this other crap taught to me that I'm trying to, undo the bad and learn the new. And there's just no other way around it, and it takes time. And being gentle with yourself. And that's where this self-compassion comes in, is that helps keep you going instead of going into shame spirals every time you mess up and go backwards. And then also we have to mess up and go backwards to get stronger to keep going forward. There's no growth if there's nothing to work on anymore.
And then do you have any techniques or suggestions on like, because right now it's been a very disorganized way
Mhm.
of trying to connect with the inner child.
Mhm.
Because I think I feel the dysregulation, and then I'm like, oh, I'm no longer connected. Let me try to get connected. And
Sure.
that's kind of been the process. But is there a way? Because I meditate pretty
Yeah.
regularly, I do yoga and I exercise. And so, like, if there's like a way to incorporate some form of like
There,
activity or
there is a way. There is a way. And I spend quite a bit of time with a couple helping them do that, right? So it is, you have to keep practicing it. We do it over and over and over again, every session, multiple times in a session. I'm helping them access their pain, right? Which we could say pain, or we could say the inner child or vulnerability or whatever. We could give specific names to the pain, grief, shame, fear. Um, so really where it always starts is in the body, right? First of all, you got to get a triggering moment. You have to get your body to have a reaction to be able to focus on that reaction. So whatever it was that triggers this feeling, you need to think about it to get there, or sometimes it just comes up on its own. And you have to be able to say to yourself, okay, I'm uncomfortable right now. I recognize that discomfort. Close your eyes, recognize where it's showing up in your body, and then being able to sit with that, linger with it. That's the first step in not abandoning, is just letting it be, letting the bad, yucky feeling be, instead of just trying to chase it away like we usually do, going to our head, think, or spinning, or yelling, or eating, or drinking, or whatever it is, right? So we have to sit with it and let it be. And then we have to start listening to what it's trying to say. Something is painful. What is the pain? Let me put some more words to the pain. What is the pain trying to do? What is this pain needing? What does it need from me right now? And how can my partner help me with it right now? And sometimes you don't have your partner there to help you with it, and so you just have to help yourself with it. And if you grew up in an environment where you learned how to do that, then you're pretty good at it. But sometimes as adults we have to learn that ourselves. So again, it sounds so easy when I just spit it out, because I do it 50,000 times a day. But I do have, the shame workshop that's on my course walks through it in the context of shame. And then this course I'm developing for anxious attachment really extensively walks people through it. But that's basically the formula. If you want to write it down, go back and watch this. The formula is access it in your body, feel it, linger with it, go back to it when you start to drift out of it. It'll hurt. It hurts. Sometimes it's a defeated feeling. Sometimes it's a scared feeling. The more nuanced you can get with it, the better, because then you start to get to know it better, and then really listen to it. What is this pain needing? If I had a child who was feeling like this, what might that child need? If when I was a child and I was sitting in my room feeling this feeling, what did I need from my parents to help me with this? And how can I give that to myself now? There's so many different ways to help a painful emotion. You can validate it, you can sit with it, you can cry it out, you can journal about it, you can go exercise, you can communicate it, you can seek help for it. I mean, there's so many different ways. Painful emotions need different things. Sometimes we need to change something in our environment to help that emotion. Sometimes we need to change the way we're thinking about something to help that emotion. But we can't ever know the answer without listening to it. And that's where therapy sometimes has to come in, right? Because sometimes it's just you need someone to hold your hand and who's trained to do that, but not always. And then it's a matter of figuring out, what do I really need here, and doing it, instead of going into that place where you do something with it that's not good for you. Make sense?
yes.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to do a little presentation here. Pull it up. Okay, so this is kind of how it all works. This is really what the book does. That's the wrong page, though. Okay, there we go. So this is really what the book is meant to do, right? This is what I do with the couples that I work with, and this is what I did on the podcast with Melissa and Drew, and soon to be Bethany and Brian. I did finish up with Bethany and Brian. It's season 2. Now we're just trying to do the editing and stuff with that to get that out. And this is what I'm trying to walk couples through self-help wise in the book. So to go from insecure attachment to secure attachment, first, I've just got to get these negative cycles stabilized where couples are, attacking each other, shutting down on each other, whatever they're doing that isn't working and is creating more disconnection between the two of them. I need to get that stable. And so that's what I'm kind of doing, in the first section of the book about where the work actually starts, after I kind of explain the attachment styles. And then we're always doing this dual process of self-healing and negative cycle healing. This is kind of the deeper work. First, we're just trying to, do some damage control. And then I'm trying to do the deeper work here with them. And that feeds on itself. The more you heal as a person, the more you will show up with your partner in a new way that will start to heal your negative cycle, which will then contribute to your own self-healing. And then as we do that, we're starting to create these positive cycles with these topics like finances or whatever. And that just increases connection. And then all of that contributes to secure attachment with it, which is just an overall felt sense of closeness and emotional safety in the relationship. And then I'm going to open up the other one. Well, first of all, let me see if we have any questions about that. Any questions about that chart? Specifically that chart.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How do you gauge your progress? Like when you're doing the work, you know how you started. And so, yeah, how do you gauge if you're doing the work correctly, if you're growing in this?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I like to tell people, the simple answer is you're having fewer negative cycles where you're, just having these discussions that leave you feeling disconnected and awful and not resolving the actual problem at hand. And then you are, oh my gosh, I say this 1,000 times and now I'm missing the second one. They're less intense when you have them. They don't get as ugly. You're not, they don't get as ugly, whatever your ugly version. Different couples have different versions of ugly. Some people that screaming and yelling, and some people it's just passive aggressive or whatever. And then when you do have them, because we never really get out, most couples are never going to fully escape negative cycles. It's just not a realistic goal. But when you do have them, they're fewer and farther between. They don't get as ugly, and you can repair much faster. And you can get back to your felt sense of safety. I like to kind of talk about it as climate versus weather. A securely attached relationship has an overall climate of closeness and safety, but we have periods of bad weather that knocks us off, but we're able to get back through to the overall good climate. Whereas those with insecure attachment, it's more defined by bad weather. The bad weather sort of chokes out the good weather. So again, to summarize, fewer negative cycles, less intense negative cycles, and faster repair.
And I'm not going to keep you. So just to make sure I understand, and I'm trying to compare it to the book,
Yep.
the rupture will happen.
Yes.
The rupture will happen. It's just, does the rupture turn into like a bigger tear, if I'm thinking about it correctly, or can we keep the rupture as small as possible before it grows?
Because you get better at actually healing the rupture. instead of just kind of shoving it under the rug only to have it resurface later. And, then everybody, all couples have their weaknesses that are going to stress them out more. And stress plus the lack of skills to stay out of negative cycles is going to create more problems. And so sometimes couples have stressors come up that they've never dealt with before. A child gets ill, or aging parents have to move in, and they get blindsided and they don't know how to cope. And we can expect that that's going to take a toll on the relationship. And then we have to kind of learn how to navigate that. But because we've already gotten these skills of navigating it, it just becomes easier and easier. And then we also, I should add this to the end of this answer. When we learn to do these repairs very well, we're actually creating positive cycles. When we get triggered, our pain is tapped into. Pain is bonding. So when we can start talking about the pain that happens in the cycles, that drives the cycles, then we're really getting to see each other and empathize with each other. And that then feels really connecting. And then the more connected we feel, the more resilience we have, the more safe we feel, the more close we feel, the more trusting we feel, the more we start to view each other through a different lens. And then that contributes to fewer negative cycles to begin with.
Thank you so much, Julie, for that explanation.
Very welcome. You're very welcome. Okay, it looks like I have something from Katrina here. Is it possible that we have more negative cycles when we start the work? Yes, anything's possible, absolutely. And sometimes just the fact that we're recognizing there are negative cycles and communicating in a new way and more, and not really yet having the skills to do that in a healing way can absolutely. And in that case, I recognize that with any couple that I see experiencing that as actual growth, because for some couples, just starting to talk about things is their movement toward health, if they are the type that just shove everything under the rug. So now, okay, great. We're bringing it out. We're starting to address it. We don't have those skills yet. So now we just need to get better at the skills. But how do you get better at the skills if you're not talking about things? So do the phases also mean that you should actively focus only on stabilizing the negative cycle and not on the next steps yet? No, I think you go as far as you can go with your ability level. And, your negative cycle, if you don't know how to manage it, it will stop you. It will find a way to stop you. Then you have to learn how to keep getting through that block, right? The blocks are going to show up. But what kind of makes or breaks you at that point where the negative cycle comes in is being able to recognize we don't have the tools yet to get through this. So we need to take a break here. We need to take a break. Our nervous systems are in a place where we're just not able to be open to each other. And we need to go kind of settle ourselves and get ourselves in a place, do a little self work that we can get to a more open place so we can be more open with each other and take turns. A huge, and sounds so simple, but a huge part of this work is just being able to take turns with each other. Right now, one partner is in the attachment need role and the other partner is in the caregiving role. And that job of that caregiving role is to lean into the other's pain, really hear them, really validate them, be able to hold your own stuff until later, when then we can now work on your stuff. It never need, one-sided relationships don't work where only one person is ever getting their validation and their needs met. But we can't do it all at the same time. When couples try to do it all at the same time and their needs are both crying at the same time, which is what happens in negative cycles, then they just bounce back and forth and nothing really gets fully addressed or healed. So that break needs to happen to get ourselves back into a place where we can kind of take turns with each other and give each other the time and space that everybody's needing. When you are dysregulated, how do you know what you really need? Well, that is can be a tough question to answer if you haven't had a lot of help getting those, figuring out what you need. And it's just a process of learning. You have to start with the dysregulated feeling. Dysregulated isn't just dysregulated, it's something in your body that's dysregulated. You got to be able to sit with that. Okay, this is that place where, I'm hurting inside. And what are the feelings around this hurt? Is it a fear that I feel? Usually dysregulated, always dysregulated is going to be a lot of fear. And get really specific with that fear. What am I afraid of right here and now? What's the fear? And when you can really listen to that fear, then yeah, you got to start to help yourself get more clear about what that fear is afraid of and what that fear needs to regain a sense of safety. Okay, we're going to go do the second slide. Okay, I think if most of you are familiar with the book material, this won't be new information to you, but I'm going to go ahead and show it anyway. So, this is the negative cycle. What couples are seeing on the surface here is they're seeing one partner is being kind of blaming and critical and protesty and, really kind of framing their concerns in a way that is not likely to help their partner be open to them, because these kinds of words are just going to end up leaving this partner feeling misunderstood and uncared for, or maybe like their needs don't matter, or whatever it is for them, which is going to be probably heavily impacted by their past experiences and relationships that they're sensitive to. And then they're not going to know how to talk about that or deal with that or even recognize that or help themselves with that. And so the way that they've learned to try to get this helped and relieved is to just get defensive and, try to tell her, well, you're wrong and here's why you're wrong. And if I can just get you to see how you're wrong, then you'll go, oh, you're right, I'm misunderstanding you. And then you don't have to sit there and feel that pain. However, this partner's trying to express their pain, right? So now they're going to feel invalidated because this partner isn't able to show up for this partner's pain. But how can this partner show up if they don't even know how to help their own pain? And then on top of that, this partner isn't really communicating their pain to them, right? So then, of course, that creates more invalidation and feelings of being alone, which then fuels more protest, which then fuels more of this, and on they go until probably this person ends up just shutting it down. Okay, any questions about that?
Hey, I am curious. Can you hear me?
I can. I'm just trying to find your box.
Bright yellow
Oh, there you
somewhere.
are. Okay, gotcha.
So I am curious how it is possible in a cycle to slow it down,
Mhm,
because I feel like I understand it right now because I'm not
mhm,
triggered, but in the moment, I don't think it's possible for me to take a beat, listen
mhm.
to myself, identify what's going on,
Yeah,
because I don't think I have, my brain gets to like quick shutdown.
yep,
And it feels very life and death in that moment.
yes.
So that's one of the things that I struggle to translate to. How can I actually get this to work when I am in a cycle?
Yeah, so great question. That's the crux here of the work, is that the very thing you have to do to get out of it is the hardest thing to do. And so the first answer I'll say is sometimes people just need extra help. Sometimes people just won't be able to do this work on their own, because whatever reason. So there's always the option of getting professional help and saying to the therapist, look, here's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to slow this down and I need some help learning how. The second thing, the self help version of the answer, is you can practice slowing it down in lower stakes moments in life. When you get triggered by traffic, when you get triggered by your mother or something that doesn't have as much emotional power over you. Our triggers tend to be the most powerful where the emotional stakes are the highest, and that's going to be in our romantic partnerships and also in our parent-child relationships. The stakes are usually going to be pretty high. But for most adults, it's most powerful in their romantic relationships. And so if you're having a really hard time there, that's like trying, can be for some people like trying to, do calculus before they've learned to do algebra or basic arithmetic. And so you got to practice with the smaller places in life. Hey, this is one of those moments where I'm starting to feel, let me see if I can kind of be and see if I can regulate my nervous system and then get better and better at it. And then the hope is that it will start to become easier when the triggers get bigger. Make sense? Okay. That's just one strategy. There's, lots of different resources out there to help with self-regulation and slowing things down. So I would recommend just, looking for books on somatic therapy, just anything you can to just continue practicing slowing it down. Okay. I think we'll just go ahead and keep doing Q&A now because I've kind of said everything I need to say. Try to keep it on the topic here if possible, which the topic is chapter 1, negative cycles, basically that, or anything else that stood out to you from chapter 1. Katrina, do you want to help me out here? And so I'm relatively fair with my answering.
Yes, Sue B has had their hand raised for a minute.
Okay.
Hi, it's Sabui. Hi. Okay. Is it okay if I'm not on video? Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you. So my question was actually from the beginning, when you actually it was like right before you displayed the video, the German video. But to get to the point, how do you know if it's self-abandonment versus you're abandoning someone?
Well, if you're not able to help that other person with their pain, and that's not always you abandoning them, some people don't know how to take it in. But if you're so triggered that you're not able to show up for them and just kind of be like, okay, what's going on here? You know what? Hold on, guys. I have an important doctor call for my daughter. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, Sabui, you asked, what did you ask again? Remind me.
So I said basically the difference between self-abandonment versus abandoning someone.
Yeah. So if you're unable to help someone with their emotions by validating, just being with them, talking them through it, supporting them, maybe they want advice from you, then that means you're abandoning them, basically. Now, it doesn't mean that, you're offering help and they can't take it in or they don't want the help. That's not abandoning because that's on them, right? But if they're actually wanting your help, and you're not able to show up for them, I don't think it's abandonment of other if you're just being really clear about being unable to help them in that moment. Like, listen, I want to help you, but I've got this other thing I'm doing that's getting in my way of focusing or whatever. That's not so much abandonment. That's just putting a bookmark on it or yeah. But what's probably when I think of abandoning other, usually what's going on is I'm so triggered in my own body that I'm not even able to help my own emotion right now. So it's impossible for me to help you with yours. And
Okay.
and so a lot of times they're going hand in hand. Like you're not able to tap in and help yourself to get to a regulated place in order to be a co-regulating presence for your partner. So it's both.
So when you talk about like, does that also go in hand versus like, for example, like if I'm doing the work, right? I decide I want to do the work as an individual. Okay. In any relationship, like you said, the most powerful is a romantic as an
Yeah.
adult, but also
Yeah.
parent and child.
Yeah.
So my question is in all my relationships, right? If I have certain values, I have certain standards
Mhm.
that, hey, this is the work I'm going to do as an individual to make sure I show up as the most authentic human I can in all my relationships. But
Mhm.
how does that go in hand when I'm like, how do I know if I'm like, I'm doing someone else's work versus am I not doing enough work? Like, I think I struggle with knowing the difference between sometimes am I taking accountability for everyone again? Am I taking
Yeah.
responsibility for, because I'm okay with saying I'm the problem, but
Sure.
I also don't know how to call out or to tell someone they're the problem. Like, I don't
Yeah.
believe in that. I think it takes two with everything.
Sure.
But I also don't know if I'm like, sometimes I'm like, am I doing someone else's work? Am I putting too much pressure on myself daily that there's always going to be something I have to work
Yeah.
on? But how do I know when to like differentiate that? Same thing. I'm like, am I abandoning myself or am I just doing too
Yeah.
much right now?
Yeah. Good. It's a really good question. First of all, you know, um, oh, shoot, what was I going to say? I'm thinking of 1,000 different things at once. First of all, the differences between fixing and helping. Okay. So if we want to be able to help each other with our feelings. I always use food and cooking examples. I don't really know why. Maybe because I love food and cooking. So think about it like if you are in a partnership and, you and your partner, want to have a meal experiences together, right? Um, you know, doing it for that person is you're doing all the cooking, you're doing all the cleaning. And in some situations in relationships, that's part of the way that they, divide their labor. So I'm not criticizing that. But if not, you're doing all the cooking and you're doing all the cleaning and you're just serving that person. That is, in an emotional sense, that's doing all the work. But if you're helping them and you guys are helping each other out with the job and it's basically reciprocal, and you're not taking responsibility for that person putting food in their mouth, but you guys are cooking together and you're helping that process and going to the market and having, accessible food in the refrigerator. I hope that analogy kind of helps. Another way to know, am I doing all the work is, are you putting your needs to the side? Are you showing up for their needs and just disavowing your own, thinking, well, if I can just get them happy with their, keep them happy, then they will show up to me in a way that I don't have to hurt, right? Then you're not really showing up and advocating for your own needs in the relationship. That would be a sign that it's out of balance. If when you're in the supportive role, you're really just trying to get them to not feel the way that they are, instead of just being with them, giving space, validating where they're coming from, before you talk about logistics or problem solving, then that's a good sign, because then you're really just trying to do the work for them by making their feeling go away instead of just being there as a supporting role. So those are two signs that it's happening. Another sign is if you're just feeling depleted and emotionally exhausted, then that's a good indicator that you're doing too much emotional labor, to the detriment of yourself and the relationship. If you have a sense that you're doing that, there's probably truth in that. If you have a sense, that's probably your body saying, hey, maybe that's happening. And you need to kind of look at, am I getting my needs met here? Am I overworking? Is this person kind of always in a distressed place and I'm always having to be in the supportive role and there's no boundaries around that. We're not meant to be emotional vending machines. And if someone is
Mm,
stuck in emotional pain all the time, that they're not there, something needs to change on their end to help them not have to be hurting all the time. Because
got you.
yeah, we can't spend our whole day in the kitchen cooking.
I think that's also, I think as a woman, someone that represents as a woman, I think also as you were taught as a young girl, you're always having to take care of something or someone. So I see how that can also come about. I appreciate your time and your advice. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Okay, who's next, Katrina?
Rudy.
Okay, Rudy, hi. How are you doing?
Good morning, Julie. I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for
Good, good.
asking.
Thank you. Thank you for everything that you do. I had a question. I guess in a way, it's me looking for hope. In a way,
Okay.
I won't give too many details, but my wife and I are separated right now, right, for a few months.
Okay.
Months, and I just went to a workshop that's meant for helping marriages. I attended it by myself, learned a lot about attachment theory, and which led me to your Instagram and all this. My I guess question is, I know there's going to be a lot of factors in this, but in your practice, in your experience, I know you were talking about earlier that sometimes one person has to be like the caregiver. As far as one person work on themselves and then it kind of switches. Obviously, different factors, different needs need to be met, and the individuals themselves, how that happens. Is there any kind of, I guess, when you see one person really working on themselves in a way, trying to lead the marriage or the couple, the relationship in general to that emotionally safe place, how often do you see that then reciprocated in the other
Mhm.
partner? More often than not, less than not. If you happen
Yeah.
to have percentages or data on that, like again, I guess at the end of the day, I'm just kind of like trying to create realistic expectations for myself,
Sure.
not get my hopes up too much, but at the same time, I know this is what I want. I want something to look
Yeah.
forward to, and so that's just, I guess, I hope you get what I'm asking.
Yeah, I think I do. So are you saying that you were in like this kind of typical anxious avoidant relationship and then it's shifted and now your wife is the one that is pulling away and you're trying to now bridge that gap?
Yeah, she was the one that asked for the separation.
Okay.
I give too much detail. I violated her trust. Twice in the
Okay.
marriage, big events. Our communication styles. If you know the behavioral like assessments, like I'm very analytical. She's very
Yeah.
dominant. I'm more reserved. I used to stonewall a lot. She's very much
Okay.
a communicator. So with the violation of trust, my
Yeah.
defensiveness, my not being able to meet eye to eye, also not really seeing her love language and meeting her like love language and her
Yeah.
needs emotionally, eventually just led to her then, what, I'm not happy and I
Yeah.
want this separation, and then things happened after that on her end, that she did, and obviously it hurts me, and so yes.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, this is not uncommon at all. Usually we're going to call it a burnout pursuer, meaning that the anxious partner really tries and tries and tries. And that doesn't necessarily mean they're the only one trying. Sometimes they're trying in ways that aren't also healthy, but they expend all this energy trying and then they become hopeless. And then they can go into a detachment process. So whether or not there's hope in that situation depends on two factors. One is how far detached are they? If they have detached to the point that they just can't get their trust back, then sometimes that is going to that some it is there's definitely less odds in your favor, just to be really honest, if that happened. However, the other big factor is, are you able to get the right kind of help? Because with the right kind of help, and that could be what you're doing now, which is finding ways to start showing up. That could be enough of the right kind of help. It could mean that you need, a higher level of professional help to get you guys back. So it's kind of a combination of that. So the next podcast I'm coming out with, Bethany and Brian, are in a very similar situation, very difficult couple to work with. They actually had been separated for a year when we started, and he's kind of the anxious / disorganized, and was very, very burnt. There were two, big betrayals for him. And she's the one now that's really trying to re-engage and fight for the relationship. And they made it. I mean, we got him there. So I know there's hope, right? It just, again, it depends on, and he was done. He was barely hanging by a thread to stay in it and just do the therapy. I think he was just so grateful to get the opportunity that kept him kind of hanging in there. And I just had to keep, reminding him, like, there's so much value in this work, even if the relationship doesn't work, there's so much value in the self-work. But anyway, there is hope. He was very, very, very done again. But so, yeah, there's definitely hope. Again, just to summarize, one is, how far gone is she? And two, are you able to access the right kind of help that's giving both of you the skills to start interacting in new ways that are now building closeness and trust? And another piece of that is, you might have to be patient and give it time, because the nervous system needs repeated experiences of something new before it starts to open up to trust. And there's wisdom in that, right? So, and maybe just kind of, are you validating her resistance at all?
Yeah, again, I've definitely been very aware of how defensive I get with maybe how she feels, or like trying to insert my own point of view, and I've really definitely practiced, these past month or two, really placing myself in her shoes and not reacting how I want to react, but just really trying to read between the lines, read the context, what she's saying, and she actually has mentioned that, say, hey, like, I noticed you are different, you seem more focused, and, so like, I know even before she even said that, like, I don't know, I do see that she knows I'm doing work, and seeing her, and I've definitely done a lot of self-reflection with just knowing where I feel in the relationship, where I need to help meet her. So, yeah, no, I appreciate your input and your advice in that. It just
how open is she? Is she wanting to? Is there a part of her that's motivated to keep going?
Keep going with us, or
yeah.
So, I mean, essentially, I know she goes back and forth, because at first, hey, I want separation, I can't do this. And I found out, oh, she's having an affair. And then, obviously that was something that I had to work with myself and stop reacting to that and blaming myself and all that stuff that comes with it. Eventually, we got to talk more about it, and she was definitely trying to see me essentially the big picture, the problem behind the problem, like what kind of led her to make the decision she made. And right, it's really hard to gauge a little bit, but I know it's not completely gone, because I don't know, just based off of her actions and what I feel like she shares, like, I can only speculate, I can only assume, but things at the very least, they're still very amicable. And it's just, I know what we talked about, she directly said, like, hey, right now I'm just not in that headspace, as far as, say, like, maybe like the romantic gestures, like, outright stuff like that. But she has mentioned, like, hey, maybe we can start over, maybe we can date again. But I know she has said, like, I do need to, like, work on myself. She does know that there's some stuff that she needs to work on. So it's very, again, I can't, like I said, it's very obviously hard to gauge, but at the same time, it's not completely far off gone. So I just, at the end of the day, I figure, okay, I'll just work on myself then, and like I was just saying, just try and maybe give myself hope in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really sorry. I know that's just a really hard place to be, in that limbo. So, it is an opportunity for you to work on the hard feelings that come up being in the limbo, but still it's painful. So keep us posted, and good luck.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Okay, let me go into the chat. Is there a possibility to have an action item or homework per chapter? What I recommend, I do have homework. Do we still have the podcast homework up, Katrina?
We do, yes.
So I would say go into the podcast on my website. I'll have Katrina put that information out there. And I do have homework for the podcast that really parallels, the work in the book. So I don't know if it's going to line up perfectly with the chapters, but that is definitely, it's going to say map your negative cycle. So, and then, yeah, if I feel like there's some homework appropriate for the chapter, I'll maybe try to put something out. There are also, exercises throughout the book, but I would say one really good one for this is the anatomy of a trigger exercise, which we will get to in another chapter, but it's also good for now to kind of understand better your cycle. See if you can find that in the book. I don't remember exactly what chapter it's in, Katrina. See if you can find that. I think it's either chapter 4 or 5. Okay. I'll take a couple more here. As someone who had an anxious attachment, learning about self-abandonment was a game changer and catapulted my healing. Amazing. So glad to hear that. I mean, that really is the defining factor for an anxious attacher heal. I mean, for both healing, but it's that usually there's a different flavor between self-abandoning for avoidant and anxious, and the anxious is typically self-abandoning for the sake of other and for the sake of relationship, and there's just so much healing in that ability to start showing up for self. Oh, great question. What is the equivalent for someone with an avoidant attachment? What thing usually makes the penny drop for them? Well, I'm going to be honest with you. In the work that I do with couples, I actually have more success getting the avoidant to stop abandoning their own feelings faster. Part of that is that those with anxious attachment are in the role, and I don't want to say this in a negative way, and I hope you don't take offense to this because I know a lot of you have an anxious attachment, but there's more of a role of being a victim, of stuck in a victim role. And it's, if you can relate to that, you were victimized. You truly were victimized. And you have an awareness of the victimization. You have an awareness that you're not being shown up for. And those with avoidant attachment, they don't have the same awareness that their emotional needs aren't being met because they have disconnected from those emotional needs. They are every bit as much victimized by their upbringing or by, the people that they have needed to rely on for emotional health. They just don't have themselves in that box because their lens isn't so much I've been a victim. And so because that layer isn't there, it's easier to get them to figure out the way I'm self-abandoning is I'm just leaving my emotions. I'm not feeling them ever. I'm not recognizing them. I don't know how. I don't even know that I have emotions. The first step is sometimes saying, wow, I'm really starting to be aware that I have emotions to begin with. Some people are that detached going into it. And then it's a matter of, okay, so if you're not managing your emotions by accessing them, naming them, understanding them, hearing them, feeling them, communicate them, how are you trying to manage your emotions? How are you doing it then? And what we're going to figure out is those with avoidant attachment are suppressing, stuffing, just trying to people please. I'm sorry, usually with avoidant, it's not so much people pleasing, but appeasing. The difference is with anxious attachment and people pleasing, it's more like, I want to make you happy so you'll be happy with me, so you'll come toward me. With avoidant attachment, it's, I want to tell you what you want to hear so you will stop coming at me. Okay. So it's one is pushing away, one is trying to pull in, but the end result is both push away. And so how are you, if you have an avoidant attachment, how are you trying to regulate your pain? Could be getting defensive and deflecting, just constantly deflecting your partner's concerns. It could be just trying to be really successful in kind of the surface level parts of life, be a good provider, get the boxes checked. If I just get the boxes checked, everything will be okay. I won't have to feel all this pain that I don't really know it's there. So, all right. So let's go to one more. Does your book also discuss how to discern between attachment and compatibility? Somewhere in there, yes. And yes, it does. And the answer is this: you can't possibly know you're incompatible about whatever the incompatibility is. We don't see eye to eye about how to live. We don't see eye to eye about wanting a family. We don't see eye to eye about how to be in a relationship. You can't possibly know if it's incompatibility without doing the work to get out of negative cycles, because the negative cycles are going to cloud it all, right? They're going to make it all convoluted. You won't be able to see clearly what the problem is. And so if you can start talking about, family planning or parenting or how to raise kids or whatever, how to deal with in-laws, if you can start talking about that outside of negative cycles with vulnerability and healthy assertion, which is the opposite of negative cycles, then you can start to figure out, all right, we're talking about this in a safe way. We're hearing each other. We're validating each other. We're really trying to understand where each other are coming from, but still we just see it so differently that we can't possibly meet each other and both be okay in the relationship. It's not something we can let go of. Maybe religion or maybe politics, can be a deal breaker for people. It's different for all people. The vast majority of the time, I see that it's not an incompatibility issue. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And the second part of that is sometimes the incompatibility is how much do we actually want to work on this relationship to get out of these negative cycles. And if one person isn't really willing to do that work over the course of time and they're not showing a lot of hope they're ever going to be, that is also an incompatibility, because that person isn't willing to help with the negative cycles. And then another incompatibility is we put all this work in and we can't get out of negative cycles. We've tried, we can't do it, and we're both miserable. That is also, that would be a good argument for incompatibility. Okay, so we will go ahead and stop here and pick back up next week for chapter 2. So, all right. Well, I'll see you guys. Thanks for coming. I hope this was super helpful, and I will see you guys next week. Okay. Bye-bye.